two, one. Hello and welcome, folks, to another edition of A Humanistic Perspective. As always, I am your host, Chad Castillo, and today I have the fortunate privilege of sitting down with John Lee. John Lee, by trade, is a product manager, and as of most recently, is the founder of CustomMobile.App, and I look forward to having this conversation. John, thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Chad.
All right, yeah. So I'd like to start by going back, if you would. Could you share maybe a little bit about your upbringing? I love to get to know from a parental relationship and cultural standpoint how it was, but also from an interpersonal standpoint. How was schooling for you? How was the emotional landscape of your life at your younger years? And where was your brain going with what you wanted to do with the rest of your life?
Okay, yeah, that's a big question.
Yeah, it's very rich.
So I'm a Korean American. I was
Beautiful.
born in the U.S. My parents are from Korea, first generation immigrants. So that's kind of the cultural background.
Beautiful.
I grew up in a Christian home, so that's a religious background, and grew up in the suburbs of New York City. So
Okay, very nice.
geographically, that's where I'm from. Let's see. So growing up as an immigrant kid, there was maybe a cultural clash of sorts. I had to navigate between two different cultures, American and Korean, but it was all I knew. So that didn't really come across to me, as I'm thinking through it now, as
Sure.
all that difficult or strange.
Now,
Emotionally,
was Korean
go ahead.
or English your first language? If you don't mind me asking.
Korean was my first language. That's,
Okay,
yeah,
very
we
nice.
learned that at home. And then I do remember going to ESL at first and maybe even into second grade. So that was something that I didn't think about. But yeah, I do remember going into ESL classes, being pulled out from the normal class to go to a separate class for a little while
Sure.
and really disliking that, really
Mm,
resisting that. And then eventually, I guess I grew out of that. So
very
yeah,
nice.
that was my growing up years.
And did you go to public school and or to a private school?
Public school, yeah, all
Public.
through elementary, middle, high school.
Were you ever bullied a lot? Were you a popular kid? What was sort of what were you maybe quiet, more reserved? I know myself, I was more of a musician. I just tend to stay around those people, and that was just sort of my
Mhm.
niche. What was that like for you?
Yeah, I was definitely not a popular kid, and I was definitely shy and
Mm,
quiet. I wasn't bullied. I think because I've always been kind of average. I think average size, average height. I did play sports, so I'm like average strength, I guess. So I wasn't ever really bullied. I didn't have
sure.
that kind of a problem. I mean, they were mean kids, but they didn't push me around because I didn't let them push me around, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, I didn't have a lot of friends either. I wasn't super popular. I had a small group of friends all throughout my school years.
Mm,
So unremarkable in that way.
sure. What were you fond of? What were you finding yourself going towards? Did you have an innate ability for math? Were you maybe more interested in the arts? What was sort of, I guess, keeping you focused, or like where did you think you were seeing yourself going career-wise based on what you were doing activity-wise?
Yes. So I think I have to admit, growing up, I was pretty. I was on autopilot for a lot of that time. I don't think I actually
Mm,
woke up to myself until my probably my late 20s. So really, growing up is pretty much a blur. I never considered myself good or really gifted in any particular area. I did well enough in school, but I didn't really consider that particular talent. I had interests. I mean, they were kind of off a little bit. My interests were being outside. I loved animals and kind of learning about biology and nature. I was
yeah.
always oriented in that direction. So I always thought, probably a good career choice would be to become a veterinarian. I kind of married my interests in animals and biology and also helping and serving the community in some way. So that was the idea I had going into college.
Okay.
Um,
And where
I'm
did you
not,
end up attending?
I went to Cornell, which is a really good school for that. So
Beautiful.
I majored in animal science there, and that was the plan going in. But I think after my first semester, I decided that's it. That was a mistake. I'm not going to be a
Mhm.
veterinarian, and but I did keep the major. It was a very flexible major, and even in university, I was pretty lost in terms of what I really wanted to do. So I just kind of defaulted from going down that veterinary track to just pre med. And
Sure.
so following the pre-med track throughout university, not super passionate about that, the bio background and the bio classes I was taking. So really floated in that way for a long time.
Mm.
I didn't
Now,
end up going to medical school, but yeah, that's,
sure. Sorry
yeah.
to cut you off, but being older now, looking back at your time in studying biology, what did you find to be personally the most fascinating or the most creative aspect of working in the field of biology?
I don't, I can't remember like a creative aspect of it, but I do remember really enjoying it. I still love science. It's a passion of mine. I love understanding how things work,
Mm.
how the body works, especially. So getting that background, I don't regret getting that education and that bio science background. It's not what I ultimately pursued career wise, but it is still an important interest in my life.
Sure. So you finish up at Cornell. Where are you going? Because you said, sort of you weren't really aware of what you wanted to do. You weren't ready to go down the pre-med route the rest of the way. So what was going
Mhm.
on in John's life?
Well, I was still going down the pre med route when I
Uh-huh.
graduated. So I worked for a year at a medical laboratory, getting some more experience under my belt before applying to med schools. I did end up applying, but in that gap between applying and then getting the results, I decided I'd just take a little adventure. So I went to Korea.
Oh, wow.
I had never been on my own, so I just, I've got 2 months. I went. I had a friend or a friend of a friend who was living out there doing some social work. So I thought maybe I can connect with him, help him out with some of his social work, and then come back and attend school, go on with the rest of my life. But I ended up staying there for over 2 years. I really enjoyed the
Wow.
work I was doing with children in foster care. I was teaching English, but also just getting to know the kids, and many of them became my students. So yeah, so that was definitely a pivoting point in my life and in my career. While I was out there, I decided to go to grad school for something else entirely.
Hmm.
Um, so to get my MBA in social policy and management, because I was in the social work area, I really enjoyed what I was doing, and I thought maybe I should go back to school, get some more training in administration in this area. So that's why I applied and got accepted to a grad program at Brandeis, and I came back to the States to attend that.
Wow. I wanted to ask, while you're in Korea, what do you notice as is the biggest like infrastructure, economics, and just general uh, living style differences from being here in America?
Well, I was in Seoul. I think the
Okay.
city itself is, much newer than the cities here in the U.S. So a lot of the facilities and infrastructure is much newer and better maintained, I would say, than in New York City, for example, which is what I was used to.
Mm.
Um,
How
yeah,
is the
it's a very tech
politics?
forward. I didn't quite follow politics in Korea. I have to say, I don't know very much about that.
Okay, sure. Do you have any stories or monuments or places or like day trips you took the kids on or that you went on yourself that you would recommend if I were to visit or anyone else?
I don't know if I'd recommend it, but I before I left, I did get the idea in my head to just go on a long through hike, and I had never done that before, and it was really just ill planned. But I walked from the edge of Seoul to the ocean. I just thought, oh, that'd be nice. It's
Wow.
on the map. It's not very far. It took a couple of days, I think, maybe 2 days to walk from the city to the ocean on the east coast. I
Wow.
did that with another gentleman, and yeah, so that was a lot of fun. Just walking all day, eating at these rural shacks, meeting people along the way, and just talking and thinking.
Mm.
Um,
Is there anything you notice about the culture of these people you're interacting with? Like, is there a specific type of happiness you see in them, or is there a way that they look at the world that you sort of could reflect on now or remember about that?
I think what I noticed when I was there was, and it kind of surprised me. I feel like when I see kids talking with each other and just young kids, they're having such interesting and deep and involved conversations. And I don't remember having these
Mm,
kinds of conversations as a kid. So when I see so many of these young people um, just engaged and having these complex conversations and being so aware of their surroundings and maybe even what's going on, like you said, in politics and all that. I never followed politics. I never read the news growing up. I felt very isolated and
mm.
yeah, just disconnected growing up. So when I saw that in these kids, these city kids, that really impressed me. I also saw a lot of the pressure, the cultural pressure over there to achieve and perform academically, professionally. So there is a lot of social pressure there that I don't feel as much here,
Mm.
which is a blessing. Um, but yeah, those are some big differences that come to mind.
Thank you for sharing that. So if you wouldn't mind, would you be willing to continue on once you come back here actually from your time in Korea?
Yeah, so I attended grad school, and that was around the time of the financial crisis. So it was very
Mm.
difficult to find work after graduating. Um, I did end up getting an internship back in Korea. So I was like, oh, interesting. Let's go back. I wanted to go back anyway. So I took that internship. It turned into a full-time position out there. And that was for a multinational company, consulting company that had a young office. So
Cool.
I was able to use my English as a consultant working on HR type projects with multinational companies.
Mhm.
But there wasn't enough work. I was there for about 9 months, I'd say, and had to leave. My Korean wasn't good enough to be like a full time consultant working with Korean clients. So there wasn't enough multinational work for me to stay there. And then from that point, I kind of hopped around a little bit, took little projects at different places, one at the university in Seoul, but ended up coming back to the US looking for full time work. And yeah, there was a big gap there. I want to say close to 2 years, I was looking for work. I think a lot of people were looking for work at that time
Yeah. My
between
father
like
was in that same
2011.
boat.
Yeah,
Yeah.
probably the hardest time in my life. If I can think back
Mm.
emotionally, um, yeah, mental state, mindset wise, very difficult. But also, I grew tremendously in that time.
Could you
And
reflect maybe on what helped you overcome that adversity and grow past that?
I think, to be honest, it was my faith that got me through that. And so my faith really strengthened in that time, even though, um, yeah, I was applying for jobs and nothing was coming back. It was faith in, I guess, God's plan for me, and that He would provide eventually when the time was right, that got me through day to day. I took a lot of walks in that time. I read a lot. I got into podcasts, I think, at that time. So
Fantastic.
there was a lot of, I discovered interests I didn't have. I discovered interest in philosophy, um, thinking critically in these areas that I hadn't explored before.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, that's carried on since then.
If you don't mind me asking, who is maybe your favorite philosopher and a philosopher that you are recently exploring their works?
So I have to say, like, I'm not a big reader
Okay.
anymore. So I don't read particular philosophers, but like I said, I listen to a lot of podcasts and on philosophical topics. Um, I mean, some of the philosophers I came across are related to like Christianity.
Mm.
So people like Alvin Plantinga, I think he's probably famous in a lot of
Planting.
other fields. Um, but William Lane Craig, I think, is a more popular philosopher that I enjoy listening to.
Sure.
So the area like Christian apologetics and how um, philosophical thinking goes into Christianity and the defense of Christianity, and thinking through like, yeah, the theology of Christianity.
Mm. I like that. Very nice. Very nice. So you're applying to jobs, you're exploring yourself a lot internally. Where do you end up coming out of this experience?
Yeah, so the first job I got after that period was at a startup in New York City. It was a lending startup that they lent to small businesses.
Mm.
So I was there for about a year. Um, it was a very unpleasant experience, very difficult working environment. But yeah, it was the experience I needed to go to the next thing. I actually quit that job just before I got married because I couldn't take it anymore. So I did get married in that time, and then landed a job, like I guess the first proper job at American Express, and that's where I guess my career kind of formally started within like the corporate world.
Sure. What was your work schedule like, or like some of the details of project tasking wise while working there
At the startup or at American
at
Express?
American Express?
At Amex, I was on the marketing operations team. So I was helping marketers kind of package their campaigns within the different systems internally, and then those would launch into the public. And so when when people got their letters in the mail or they got their emails marketing them to get a new credit card or upgrade or whatever, all of that technology that goes behind those marketing campaigns
Sure.
were set up by our team. So that was kind of work we did. And then while I was there, actually, I decided to make a shift career-wise into more product management, and that's where I am now. But
Understood.
yeah, that was where I took a lateral move to go in this direction. And yeah, I think that's kind of when I found out what I really wanted to do. It was
Okay.
really probably in my early 30s that I decided, okay, I like product management. I like software, designing and building and thinking about software as a way to solve problems. And that's where I've been for the last 7 or 8 years.
That's fascinating. So, what do you think are the best skill sets or the most universally applicable lessons you've learned from being a project manager?
Hmm. Well, some of the learnings I'm experiencing now is product management has a lot to do with teamwork. So you can have a lot of really talented, gifted people on the team, but without leadership, really, and guidance and definition of what needs to be done, it's very difficult for even a very talented team to build things efficiently and build the right things. So
Mm.
I'm getting a deeper appreciation for the role of, I guess, leadership in helping a team achieve its full potential and really work well together and smoothly to build things, effectively, and build the right things in the right way.
Mm, I like that. Yeah, no, I think that's so key oftentimes is like, there's so many different types of leadership styles, but at the end of the day, as long as you can make sure that you're building the cohesion of your team and doing it in a way where it's an open and collaborative environment, but the task at hand is being achieved, I think that's extremely effective for a leader to be able to do. With working on your project management, what's been the most successful project you guys have completed or task that you're like extremely proud of that you've worked on?
Hmm. Well, my jobs have all been within companies, working on like internal or external facing applications. But to be honest, I'm not super proud of anything I've worked on at
Mm.
these employers. Personally, on the side, I've built uh, my own business. CustomMobile.App is the domain. That I'm quite proud of. It's taken a couple of years to get it to this point, but it started as a product business. Um,
Mm.
I'm sorry, there's some
Oh, no.
strangers talking to me. Give me a second. No, it's closed. Yeah. You can cut that out, hopefully.
Oh, no, you're totally cool. I might, maybe not. We'll see. Comedic effect.
Okay. What was I saying? Yeah,
Uh,
so
yeah,
the business actually started as a product company. I was building a software product, like an app, a podcast app,
sure.
that listeners could listen to podcasts, but also interact with the shows inside the app. So it'd be like a social podcast app. That's how it started. I learned a lot through that process, but eventually had to pivot the business toward what it is now, which is more of an agency and helping content creators and podcasters build apps for themselves. So it's more of a white labeled agency model rather than building our own app and launching that and spreading that in the world.
That's super fascinating. What I guess first gave you the inspiration to work on this project at all in general?
So I've been interested, like I said, in product design and building things for myself for a long time. I'd say since grad school, I've been thinking about building my own products. I got into podcasting or listening to podcasts, I want to say just around that time as well. And so it kind of came from a personal need, a personal desire to interact with the shows I was listening to, but also share very, very easily clips of episodes that I was listening to with family and friends.
Sure.
Even now, it's pretty difficult to do that. But 8 years ago, or yeah, maybe 5 to 8 years ago, it was really difficult. There wasn't an option out there, and so that was the initial impetus for me thinking about it and designing something that would help listeners take clips of episodes and share them really easily right from the app, their listening app itself, um, and then also interact with the shows.
Mm. I like that idea too, because I tend to do that too. Or I'll like what I do now is I'll just like find the video, send the link, and then give a timestamp is like the most effective way to share a podcast, I feel like. But that's really interesting. So what made you as an entrepreneur understand that okay, I need to pivot this product a little bit and turn into sort of where we're helping others create their
Mhm.
application?
It was a combination of things. So I learned throughout the process just how expensive it is to build your own product, but not only build it, but maintain it. And
Mm,
it's very capital intensive for an individual or a small team, a small founding team. Me and my co-founder, it wasn't financially viable for us to be doing that, maintaining a platform going forward. So there was a cost element to it, and there was also a market element to it. While we were building the app, and we hired an agency to help us do that, I did see other social podcast apps come and then fail in the market just again and again. And I saw other more dominant apps add social features into their apps, but
mm,
these features were not being very used very much. And that kind of brought me to the point where I realized, okay, I'm building the wrong thing. It's not going to be used. Even if I built it, it's not going to succeed. So I came to a hard
sure.
decision around March or February of last year, just around when COVID was kind of coming in, and I decided, oh, I've got to figure something else out. And that's when I thought, well, we have this technology. Can we white label it to help podcasters at least make mobile apps for themselves? And so that's where the idea began. We did some validation and testing for a couple of months, and then
Mhm.
actually for like half a year. And then we rebranded and launched in January of this year, CustomMobile.App.
That's fantastic. And do you have any clients so far? How's the experience been going?
We've got a number of clients. I want to say maybe around 45 clients.
Nice.
So it's still pretty small. We're not breaking even at this point, but hoping to break
Mm,
even in the next couple of months. It is mostly myself. I do have a tech co-founder, but
mm.
right now it's mostly myself managing everything from the marketing to the lead generation to onboarding clients, customer service. Yeah, I'm doing everything.
Wow, it's probably really intensive. I'm sure your daily schedule is pretty rigorous then.
Yes, I have very little time for anything else because I also have a full-time job as well.
Oh
So
my
this is a side
gosh.
project that I'm working on the side to hopefully build up and supplement our income and yeah, just build
Sure.
up into a proper business.
I like that. I like that. Did you bootstrap this project? How much do you have invested in the project? If you don't mind me asking, or if you would.
Yeah, we did bootstrap it. I asked family and friends for help.
Mm,
So we did get some investment, I want to say maybe around 30 to 35,000 in investment from family and friends. And then the rest we borrowed. And I'm kind of embarrassed at how much I borrowed. Borrowing really from credit cards, to be honest with you. So it was very risky. And I
sure.
wouldn't do it this way again, but using credit cards and maxing them out. And I think probably in total, if you combined all the money that we borrowed from credit cards and emptying my 401k as well,
Mm-hmm.
well over $100,000 to build this app, which never actually launched. So it was a very expensive education for
Sure.
sure, and still
Definitely.
paying those loans off with the revenue from the agency business. But yeah, that's the goal, to build up the agency business to the point where we can really break even, make
Mm,
those loan payments, and then continue building it to generate profit going forward.
very nice. What is your favorite part about working on a custom mobile app now?
I love the learning aspect of it. I learned so much through the project. I really can't regret the time and the expense that's gone into it. It's growing me as a person, just learning how to deal with people. I'm not a people person by nature. I'm not an extrovert by nature. So being forced to reach out to potential clients and customers, talk to them over the phone, um, serve them as they become clients, and just interact with them every single day.
Hmm.
That's been really stretching for me. Learning how to market the business, all of that is brand new to me. Like, how do you get the word out on your business? And I guess as a podcaster, it's the same thing. You've built a product, how do you get the word out about your product to the rest of the world? How do you get in front of your potential listeners, your potential audience?
Mm.
All of these things I just learn by doing, and there's no other way to learn. So I'm thankful for the opportunity that this project gives me to learn these skills in a real world setting. Yeah. So
Is there a common correlation you notice among podcasters and specifically among your clients?
I do. I think my clients tend to be more business minded. So they see their shows not just as a show that they're producing and spreading into the world, but they're looking at their show as maybe an on ramp to a business. So they're thinking about, how do I turn this show into a business that pays for itself, but also might be a platform to build uh, a bigger content business, maybe including video or written content. But they're thinking more business minded.
Sure.
Yeah, so that's what I'm seeing.
Okay, very nice. Yeah, I guess I would, from my personal experience, I would say I'm starting to do the same thing in the way that I'm observing and interacting with the platforms of social media as well as how I'm communicating. Um, but that's fascinating. Yeah, I've never, I guess for me, my whole take on it is I love the idea of just like openly discussing and allowing that experience of connecting with another human to sort of guide a conversation and allow the learnings to be discerned by the listener. And I find that my format is very very free flowing in that style. But that's very unique. I have never thought about taking my format and making it and saying how can I build the business model out of the format. That's really unique to see as a correlation.
Yeah. No, as I hear you speak, conversations are the way that human beings have learned from each other since the beginning of time, right? And I still think it's the best way to learn, to talk to somebody. And um, what I realized was, like, talking is actually thinking.
Mm,
You're fully activated when you're having a conversation. You're thinking on the fly and you're exploring new territory together as you're speaking out loud. And you just can't replace that really by with any other method or means. And as you do more of these conversations, I'm sure you're just going to get better and better at these. Like Joe Rogan, I'm sure, has had thousands and thousands of
oh yeah.
conversations, and he's
Beast.
now a master at delving into the subject matter expertise of his guests, and to be able
Mm.
to um, like pull those out, follow lines of thought, and pull insights out. That itself is an art and a science in itself. And yeah, you're going to get there, and I'm sure, yeah, you're definitely much further along in that skill set than I am or will probably ever be.
Oh, well, thank you. That's very humbling to hear you say that. But I definitely understand and reflect that I'm growing every day. Like the best part I think too is the fact that I do all my editing. So like when you get
Mhm.
to hear something back and you get to do that retention process of like there's parts of a conversation because I'm in the moment so much I'm listening to that I go back and listen. I'll be like, whoa, I completely missed this verbiage or this concept because in the moment I was focused on a different concept of that strain of thought. So that's been really exciting for growing as a speaker and as someone who gives questions. I wanted to ask, what is your perception on the idea of free will? Do you believe we have free will, or do you believe that it's just something we perceive?
I do. I believe we do have genuine free will. Yeah. I don't believe in a deterministic, um, yeah, that our free will is determined by like our the physical processes,
Mm,
um, yeah, the physics going on in our brains.
sure. That's fantastic. Cool. Thank you for sharing. I love just, asking, exploring the brain. Let's see where things go. How is your
Yeah.
current thoughts on technology? Couple things. One, social media.
Actually, can we go back to that question? Because I find it fascinating. What's your view on that? Do you also believe in genuine free will, or are you a determinist?
Yeah, no, thank you for asking. I I don't know. I think I have an interesting perception. I believe that free will is actually a perceived thing. I believe that there I think that our brains can cognitively, I don't know, it's kind of selfish of me to think that the idea that we as a society or as a creature are so powerful that the choice we make was clearly ours, when I think there's so much that's happening out there and so many mechanisms of this world that we have yet to discover. So my concept on it is I think we have a perceptive free will, right? I think there's a couple different paths that are in front of you, but no matter what's laid out in front of you, one of them was actually going to be the one that was meant to be at the end of the day. And
Mhm.
yeah, no, it's something that's I think really interesting, especially as I explore further into spirituality and sort of coming to terms with what I believe that is. And I'm starting to do that by exploring a lot of philosophers. So I'm starting with a little bit with Friedrich Nietzsche. I want to see sort of that existentialism. I want to go down
Mhm.
that atheist route, see what that perception is. And then I also recently I've been studying a little bit of Buddhism. I
Yeah.
studied, Mahayana, some Theravada Buddhism. I got into that world, and I've just been so excited. And my biggest thing is I try and contemplate and reflect so often on the idea of humbling myself and recognizing that humans have um, cognitive abilities to feel like selfish tendencies in all of the emotional landscape and aspects that we explore. And so I don't know. I just feel like there's so much that is yet to be discovered in the world, and the world is so expansive in its
Yeah.
existence that maybe free will for me is something that's yeah, just perceived. I don't know. That's sort of my
Can
thought.
I follow that thread just a little bit? So,
Sure.
when you say perceived free will, I think you're saying that free will is an illusion. It's a useful fiction, but in reality,
Mm,
it, we don't genuinely have the ability to make real choices. Those choices are determined by the physics going on in our heads. If
yeah.
that's the case, maybe a question would be, um, then how do you hear that? That sounds to me like that view on rationality itself.
Mm,
So when I think about a proposition or a belief being a rational belief,
sure.
that implies to me, or to me, that involves the making a decision to believe that belief, whatever it is,
Mm,
based on reasons. Like I'm believing to believe this thing, this proposition, because of the reasons that I have for it.
sure.
So it seems to me that rationality requires genuine free will. And if
Mm,
free will is not real, if our beliefs and choices are, then it seems to me that uh, there are no truly rational beliefs. There are no rational,
mm,
they're all determined. If that's the case, even if that I don't have is itself an irrational belief, if you can follow that. So just to kind of go back, it seems to me that the belief free will is an illusion, itself an irrational belief. That's, I guess, in a nutshell, why I think there's something there. Did you follow
mm.
that?
I did. Oh, that's so fascinating. Yeah. Yeah, it was boiling down more of the metaphysics of of how I got to the concept and understanding that yeah, I do see that tendency that I think I do that too. And I think that might be part of my 20s and my intellectual curiosity is I always try and ration and deduce every single topic. And I do see that does lead my thought process a lot. That's fascinating. I've never boiled it down that way because no one's ever pressed me on that topic. So thank you for that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating, like, just topic to think about, like, just rationality itself. Free will required for rationality? In my opinion, is yes. You need free will
Mm,
to make any rational decision, including the decision to believe in anything. So if you don't have it, it kind of undermines rationality.
mm.
So yeah,
I,
maybe
I
something to chew on.
yeah, definitely. This is something that when I go back and I reflect, I always take notes of things that for me to personally go back, meditate on, sit on, and think on. That's definitely I already highlighted that on my paper. Following this thread too, with free will, and I guess what is your thoughts on the simulation theory that our whole existence could be potentially simulated?
Um,
Because I think that too also ties heavily into my conceptualization, my
mm,
conception of how I get to my free will thinking.
yeah, I mean, I think I've heard of something like that. How do you know you're not a brain in a vat, right? And everything you're experiencing, or you're in the matrix, right? That's
Mm,
basically the thought experiment. I mean, I guess it's possible. Sure, like anything is possible, but
sure.
it's not. I don't see how that affects how I'm going to live my day to day. So, what do you think are the implications of? I mean, if we're in a simulation and there was some way to validate that,
Sure.
I guess it depends on. There are more questions that come out of that. Like, does that mean meaningless or purposeless? It depends on the simulation. Whose simulation is it? And do I have free will within the simulation?
Right. Yeah, no, that's sort of that's the concept, is like how if humans are able to, with our ability, be able to like create quantum computing, create computing, and be able to generate stuff itself, why couldn't there be something larger that actually could have potentially generated all of this? I mean, even with the concept of, we now see there's labs in the world that are, trying to develop black holes on Earth. And so if we're able to use the powers we have as we continue to increase our intellectual awareness of technology, why couldn't it be perceived that there is potentially, and who knows, maybe what if it is potentially God who is the one who is actually controlling the end all be all simulation? But the fact that maybe I don't know, I like the idea that, I think it's fascinating that it could potentially not exist as the religion, but coexist with religion. And that potentially, what if the questioning on, is this a simulation, is not rather, is it a simulation versus a spirituality thing with a god, but rather, is a god using a simulation to keep everything going as it is? um,
Yeah, I don't think that's too far off from the current Christian understanding of creation. Like God
mm,
created reality. Um, I don't see that being as too far off what we're talking about. Like we are living in a simulation. We are living in a creation, and there is a creator. And if in the case of a simulation, there is an engineer who
mm,
has created the simulation. So I'm not seeing too big of a distance between those two ideas.
sure. This is fascinating. I haven't really explored much of Christianity. Could you maybe, from your perspective, what are some takeaways or some fascinating things that I might be able to learn from your perspective on the lens of Christianity?
Okay. No one's ever asked me that question, so I'm just gonna do the best I can, I guess.
Sure.
I
Yeah.
think,
No. And thank you for being able to have this vulnerable and open of a conversation. It's
oh, no
actually,
problem at all. Yeah, it's a privilege.
yeah.
I think for me, the main distinction between Christianity and everything else, like all the other worldviews out there,
Mm,
ah, is it is the anti-performance based worldview. So, like
mm,
everything else in life and in every other religion, it's all about your performance. Like you have to achieve salvation with good works. Um, in the workplace, yeah, you're judged based on your performance. You have performance reviews,
mm,
and everything else, right? You've got to follow the rules in order to get to heaven and earn your way. Your salvation is earned. But I think Christianity is different. Is in that your salvation is received. It's not earned. I think there's a pithy phrase I'm trying to remember. It's it's grace based. It's um, Christianity is the only worldview where you're saved not by earning it, but by receiving it as a gift. And so the only requirement is to admit that you can't save yourself. So in that way, it's got this humble or humility at the
yeah.
center of its view of salvation. Whereas in everything else, um, there is maybe a self actualization or a performance driven motive at the center of every other worldview. That's kind of the
Mm,
way I see it. Does that make
yeah.
sense?
Yeah, that does make sense. I'm thinking of it distinctly as when I'm thinking about Buddhism, right? The idea that there is internal suffering, and that they give you usually in some formats of Buddhism, depending on the ones you subscribe to, there's a path
Yep.
to overcoming
Hmm.
the suffering and achieving it. But I get what you're
That's
saying.
right.
Yet it's flipping that whole concept on its head. And wow, that kind of gave me
Yeah.
goosebumps, because I think one of the most powerful things, there's two powerful things for a human. I think one of them is humbleness, because humbleness allows you to recognize and to be conscious and aware. But I think the second thing too is we love having some sort of structure or rules because it allows
Mhm.
us to like grow and push ourselves. So how does that concept of, I guess, having some sort of structure or rule base play then in Christianity
Mm.
if the whole concept
Mhm.
is receiving instead of achieving?
Yeah, so that's a great question too. Just taking a step back to
Sure.
you talking about paths and yeah, every other system will give you like a path, how to achieve this or that. They'll give you rules or maybe like the Ten Commandments or the Fourfold Path or whatever it is. There's always these rules to follow to achieve nirvana or salvation or the end goal. And like you said, in Christianity, the only requirement is to admit that you can't earn your way and just to receive God's love as a free gift. And so that's the requirement. The only structure then that follows from that exchange, or not exchange, but when you receive love from somebody
Yeah.
and you love that person in return, there are guidelines around that relationship. It's a relationship. It's not like a 10-step plan. And so when I think about the friendships in my life or even my marriage, these love relationships have structure around them. Um, I'm not going to do things that are going to hurt my wife or hurt my friends. So there are rules, but they're rules governed by and driven by love. So I think that's the way that in Christianity it's framed. Like
Sure.
the only law or the two laws that are given by Jesus is like you love God with all your heart, mind, and strength, and then you love your neighbor as yourself. So love is the law that Christians follow, and it's not like a defined 10-step program or pray these many times a day in this direction or wear these clothes, eat this food. Yeah, it's I think it's much simpler in that way, but also much more difficult to keep.
Mm, that's fascinating. I That's unique too. Like that idea that if you actually boil it down to a much more simplistic idea of just focusing on the love, the autonomy of focusing on that will allow the rest of the sort of idea that the rules are there come into play and will build that
Exactly.
structure of the relationships.
Exactly. Yeah. You don't need any of the other rules. If you love somebody and you're loving them properly, you don't need any other laws. Like if we all loved each other, we wouldn't
Right.
need laws, right? So
Right. Yeah. Because then technically anarchy wouldn't really be there. You can live in an anarchist society without anarchy if everyone loved each other.
exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
That's so cool. Huh. Very interesting. What do you believe is the meaning of happiness?
I was thinking about this yesterday, actually.
Mm,
So I think so. Here's a phrase that I came up with last night.
okay.
Um, the secret to the secret to satisfaction is not self-actualization, but self-submission. I think that's the phrase I came up with. So I believe the only way to be truly happy is to submit ourselves to God and to receive His love as a free gift. That I think is the secret to it, and it's also the hardest thing to do.
Mm,
But yeah, I think that's at the core. I think the seed or the core of all the unhappiness I see in the world, I think boils down to people trying to achieve their own um, self worth. They're trying to earn their own self worth through achievement, through performance,
mm,
through um, good work, whatever, however you want to define that. And it's the burden of self actualizing their potential that is crushing people and leading to
sure.
unhappiness.
Mm. Yeah, that's fascinating. I think I'm in a similar boat. Whereas I do believe happiness is when you give up your personal selfish intentions and start living with the purpose of just being there and giving good energy to others and just existing in a space and an atmosphere in which highlights um, gratitude and unity with the people and the space and everything that's existing around you. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
I mean, you used a couple of words there that I find really fascinating. You used the word,
mm,
I think, purpose and gratitude.
mm,
Maybe you used the word meaning. So I've thought about meaning and purpose maybe a couple of months ago back, and
sure.
people use that all the time. Like, I want my life to have meaning and have a purpose. But for me, when I think about those words, I feel like meaning only comes once you define a purpose. So if there is a purpose to your life, like given a purpose, then your actions can be meaningful toward that purpose.
Mm,
And in my worldview, God gives every one of his children a purpose in life. The purpose is to love him and love your neighbor, to keep it simple. And
mm,
therefore, everything you do is meaningful toward that purpose. But for folks who don't have what would you call it? A, um,
like a foundation for their home.
or a theistic worldview, if you don't have a
Sure.
God in your worldview, where did you derive a purpose, maybe like an objective purpose that would make everything else in your life meaningful? So
Sure.
that's the question, I think.
I think people who might be thinking in that mentality would probably say that they would drive their purpose from a selfish internal intrinsic value then at that point, wouldn't they?
You'd have to make something up. I mean, the whole cultural thing is um, you define the purpose for your own life. Like, it's up to you to define your own purpose.
Sure.
But that's very, very difficult. I don't know
Mm.
how people do that. And if you decide one day I'm gonna have make this the purpose of my life, well, I don't know how realistic it is for that to stick and for you to live your life according to that. I just think it's very difficult, and I think a lot of people are feeling the effects of trying to define their own purpose, and maybe failing at that and not knowing where to turn.
John, this is the first time ever that someone has pushed me to think of the demise and the terrible aspects of social media in a different way. I don't think of it now, I guess, as being well, it still does these things. It's still highlighting the highlight reel of people's lives, and so intrinsically you're comparing yourself to that part of them. But now I'm starting to think of it as is the reason that I think social media can be so unhealthy is it's making you feel even more like you don't have a sense of purpose because you haven't been able to discover it yet, and you're being distracted by highlights of what you might believe or perceive as someone else's purpose.
Yeah. No, I think we're always being advertised to in terms of your purpose should be this or that. Like, your purpose should be to be rich, or your purpose
Mm,
should be to be a successful professional. Your purpose should be to be beautiful. Like, whatever it is, you're always being marketed to. So we're always being pulled in these different directions. And if you follow one of these with some level of commitment, you'll find that it's often, yeah, it's just too difficult. I mean,
mm,
you're always going to fail. And these purposes, you can call them, we're all living for something, right? We're living toward
right.
something. We have to define something, whether consciously or subconsciously, to follow something. And then it becomes oppressive, whatever that is, whatever that goal is, or that aspiration is, or that idol is. In the end, it crushes you. It asks you to make sacrifices for it. And
Mm,
we sacrifice our time, our energy, our emotional and mental health for it. And in the end, we can never achieve it. And when you can achieve it, when you cannot achieve it, I mean, it crushes you. It never forgives you. And when you do achieve it, you find that it doesn't satisfy you. So it's like a lose lose situation that a lot of us are trapped in. Is the way that I see it.
sure. So, John, how would you like one sentence, clear as day, define your purpose? And then what are some, I guess, examples of action steps in your actual way that you live that would highlight that?
Yeah. So I mentioned before, my purpose is the purpose of every Christian, is to love God and love my neighbor as
Hmm.
myself. That's my purpose. And the action step is to treat the people in my life, my friends, my family, my neighbors, and love them as best I can every day. Um, One way I do that is to stop working at 5 o'clock and devote my mind and attention and time to my family and my friends. So that's one way that I try to serve them in that way, and not let work which I think for men is a big idol. Let work overtake one's life and have too much sway and power over our hearts and minds.
Truly, because it's funny that you say that. I came from a household where I faced a lot of adversity. You know, there was verbal abuse, there was physical abuse, there was a lot of great things, though. My parents were fantastic. I wouldn't change a thing about the way I was raised. But I found that so much of me escaped through school and through work that it became almost like I thought that was my sense of purpose. And it wasn't actually until recently when I just got out of a relationship and realized that I had even clearly stated during the relationship that the most important thing in my life was work, when really it was the financial stability of making sure that you have money, making sure that you can live and be that way. And it wasn't until I was out of that relationship and I was starting to have more emotional quandaries with where am I finding my happiness? Where is what brings me stability? And that I realized that my work no longer was that, and that I actually just had that realization. And I think men, when we're that concept of we emotionally suppress things, or like we're not supposed to cry, or all these other very masculine based things, I think that is also in turn shown up in the way that we are emotionally handling and dealing with this idea that work must be the most important thing.
Yeah, I'm sorry I missed some of that just because the connection went out. But I think I heard that work used to be like an idol for you, and then you recently realized that it wasn't the work itself, but maybe the financial security that comes from work that was really driving you. And
Yeah,
so it's the maybe it was the insecurity of feeling like you don't have enough money that was driving you to overwork.
sure. For you, what is the most important aspect or characteristic of being a good partner and to maintain stability in your relationship with your spouse?
Most important part, well, I think tactically, one of the lessons I've learned after being married is to try to never complain. So I will want to complain a lot,
Mm.
but to hold back and not complain, I think goes a long way in like preserving and making a marriage better and better over time. Because complaining doesn't change anybody is something that I've learned, and also it kind of goes into my faith as well. I also believe that over time God is going to work on my spouse as well as just the way he's working on me. So there's an aspect of faith there as well. I can be patient and I can hold back criticism because I trust in a God who is also working in my spouse as he's working in myself.
Mm.
So that's what comes to mind.
It's so funny because reflecting reflecting on Christianity from this received and accepting perspective on it,
Mhm.
it's making it really fascinating to screw it, dang, I just lost this thought, like uh to explore that was it, to explore the temperance in the religion.
Mhm.
I feel like my personal experience with the people around me who subscribe to Christianity has been so it's been very chaotic and lively because I think there's passion involved often. But for me, like that's not the most understanding way to try and recognize something, and I find
Mhm.
this tempered perspective on it um, very warming, very new and exciting.
Yeah, I think I hear you. So you're saying when you've talked to other Christians, it's been quite like heated the conversation,
Mm.
whereas maybe the way I'm talking about it is maybe less passionate or more
No,
dispassionate.
no, it's still
No, but I think there's something to that. I think people get
sure.
angry when they feel insecure, and if you have doubts, right, yourself, sometimes people compensate for those doubts with more passion and more heat
Mm.
and aggression. So I can see that. Like, um, I feel like I've worked through a lot of the questions that I used to have, and so I don't feel as um, what's the word, like insecure about what I believe because I kind of thought through why I believe what I believe. And
Yeah.
I'm not sure a lot of people have done that.
Mm. What was your what was your belief system in general? I know you probably won't know all the specifications. In your 20s, what was your belief system like, and how did you see it growing, or what have you now gotten rid of in your belief system? What have you changed about that? Or I guess what in your maturing and aging has shifted about your mentality?
So what have I learned as I've grown older? I think one thing I've learned actually as I've grown older is that people seem to always feel young. Like even though I'm headed toward 40 now, I still feel like a teenager. And I think that's true for people who are in their 50s and 60s and 70s. I think when I'm 70, I'm still going to feel like a child and just maybe not as insecure, but still so I'm going to feel young. And I think that's something I didn't realize when I was younger, that older people feel young, even though they look old. They
Right.
still feel, a lot of people feel insecure and scared and intimidated by younger people, even when they're in their 60s and 70s and have accomplished so much.
Mm.
People don't get over their insecurities that easily, that quickly. And um, yeah, there are a lot of people who are grandmothers and grandfathers who feel as nervous and as maybe shy as I do sometimes, and as I did when I was younger. So that was something new that I've recognized as I've gotten older.
Mm. That's fascinating. That makes me. There's one thing that I was when I was really younger, I had so much like pent up anger in me, and I always wanted everyone around me to be just as mature or more mature than me, because I always like thought I had a very narcissistic opinion that I was like the pinnacle of maturity for my age range, which was that shows you how immature I was.
Yeah.
But I I guess that idea right there, like me and my mom always had a disconnect because she has always done that. She's very, very youthful, very energetic, very curious in a childlike sense to just explore, have fun, be with people, communicate, doing all those things. And I had such a disconnect from wanting to be that way. I was like, no, I want to be what I thought was being an adult, which was just really being more like academic based and just sort of like being a bit of a recluse. And
Mm.
it's so fascinating because I can tell in the way that you talk and in the way that you're processing each of these thoughts, there is a true sincerity to the reflection that you've had on these physical words and concepts. Where, moreover, and as the reason I do this show even is like, I'm starting to explore and even just dip my toes in what the breadth and depth of each of these words that we're describing and how much more vivid they become in their perception. And I appreciate your openness, and it's been extremely fascinating. I can tell that there's a sense of exploration and internal discovery you've done that I don't think a lot of people maybe have had. Do you meditate, or is it just spending time outside in nature? How do you think you've gotten to such a reflective point in your life?
Yeah. And I'm going to have to make this the last question, Chad, just because
Sure.
I got to get back to work. But I do think one practice I do has helped me, and I'm going to continue it for the rest of my life, is the first thing I do when I wake up after I've washed up and everything is to maybe go outside and I read my Bible for a little bit and I journal about what I'm reading, what I'm thinking about, what comes to mind. I do write down a couple of things I'm thankful for each day
Mm.
just to exercise that gratitude muscle. I do think it's a muscle that needs to be exercised so that my mind can more readily um, jump to things I'm thankful for throughout the day. It's not, a terrible effort. And I think gratitude is another secret to happiness. If you can't be thankful and unhappy at the same time. So exercising that muscle really helps keep my mindset in the right place.
Mm.
And then yeah, I pray. So there's like maybe half an hour every morning where I go through this kind of ritual for myself, and I've done it for a long time, probably since I was a teenager. I think that's
Wow.
that's gone a long way to keeping me reflective and thinking through what's important, getting my head on straight.
Sure.
It hasn't always been in the morning either, but I've always tried to set aside a little bit of time for
Mhm.
that purpose to spend time with God and thinking through the important things that I want to keep in front of my mind.
Very nice. Thank you for sharing that. I like to, before we finish up here, is there anything you would like to plug? Any media outlets, any places people can check you out that you'd like to share?
Yeah, so the only website I have is for my side business, and that's CustomMobile.App. So if you'd like to explore what we're doing, we make custom branded apps for content creators. You can find us there. And yeah, I love having these conversations. I mean, Chad, this
Yeah.
is the best conversation I've had in probably months, and I wish I
Wow.
had the time to do more of these because it's like my second or first passion is to have these kinds of deep philosophical conversations. I wish I could have them all the time. So
Yeah.
thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, no, thank you, really, John. You've both opened my eyes, you've pushed me as a interviewer, and it's been a fortunate privilege for me also to have this dialogue with you. So thank you.
Yeah. And anytime, if you want to do it again, you can just, yeah, call me and I'll be up for another conversation anytime.
Oh, same here, anytime. All right, there you have it, folks. This has been another edition of A Humanistic Perspective. Thank you so much for joining us. As always, stay working hard, love your life, and we'll catch you later.